In today's video, I want to talk about empowering yourself through your tarot readings, as well as how to read tarot for others in an empowering way. And we're going to look into how we can utilize all of the book learnings, the traditional meanings, etc. that we have learnt, as well as tapping into our intuition and more. So if you're interested, get yourself a nice hot drink, settle back, relax, and enjoy. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me for today's video. I hope that you are well and looking after yourselves. So today I want to talk about how to empower yourself and others when you are working with the tarot, how to read tarot intuitively, as well as utilizing your understanding of the traditional meanings of the cards as you have learnt them, how to read for yourself, others, merging all of those learnings, all of those teachings that you have developed over time, how to do it in a way that's really empowering for yourself as well as others. So within the tarot community and within occult communities, there's a lot of talk around psychic readings versus readings that come from more of an archetypal place or maybe a psychological place. And I do believe that you can bring your readings together to create something that includes all of it, that doesn't necessarily just require the book meanings to be memorized by heart and then prattled off, by rote, but also that doesn't just rely on the intuition either, because I think that to be a really, really good tarot reader and to be empowering for yourself when you're reading for yourself and to be empowering for others, it's really lovely to have a blend of both, to understand those traditional meanings and to be doing your studies and to continue that work, because I don't believe that is ever ending for me, but also to trust your intuition and understand how to tap into those more psychically channeled messages perhaps. I want to flip through some beautiful decks with you. I was really kindly sent these 3 beautiful decks from Ethony Dawn within our own community. Ethony is a witch and a tarot reader with so much experience, created a number of decks, and she is the author of Your Tarot Court, which is a book that I absolutely adore, as well as I think it's called The Tarot Grimoire, which is coming out shortly. I saw Ethony on the Llewellyn Con a few months ago and I really enjoyed that. I am really grateful to Ethony for sending me these decks. I am just so excited to get stuck in, so I thought that they would be perfect to flip through while we discuss this topic. This is the Awakened Soul, an oracle deck that came out a number of years ago, as well as the Modern Love Tarot, which was Ethony's first tarot deck, and I have had this on my list for so long, so I'm so thrilled to have this. And this is Ethony's latest deck, so I thought maybe we could flip through this first. Well, with all of the decks, I will say that the boxes are such great quality. There's a magnetic clasp here. Obviously, everything is so beautiful. The images, the art in this deck is by James Fenner. The Cosmic Wisdom Tarot blends the classic structure with modern symbols and imagery, making it a perfect guide for your spiritual journey, perfect for those seeking guidance or clarity or just a reflective moment. This deck serves as a spiritual guide, connecting timeless wisdom with today's journey through the archetypes of the tarot. Let's have a little look. I love this back as well, it's so beautiful. These are the beautiful backs. So the cardstock is quite thick, but as you can see, it doesn't end up being that thick of a deck. I'm not really a riffle shuffler, so I'm happy to kind of hand shuffle these, and I just love this iridescence, and the backs are just stunning. I love a bit of gilding on my decks. And this is the beautiful book, which it has such a beautiful setup on the inside. So you can see lots of keywords and meanings. It makes it really, really easy if someone is coming to the tarot for the first time, or if someone is just developing their knowledge. I think that this is a perfect deck for that. Obviously colour, so yeah, it's so well done. I'm really impressed with that. It's just beautiful. So let's have a look through the cards. So let's talk about how we can empower ourselves and how we can empower others when we're reading tarot and what that looks like. So first of all, we'll need to understand that tarot is a tool, and I think that in wider communities and society, tarot is something that is often feared and thought of as a fortune telling tool, and a lot of that has to do with Hollywood and perceptions that are not accurate. Now, that's not to say that tarot can't be a predictive tool, because it certainly can, and there is nothing wrong with predictive reading, but there is so much more to it to explore, and there's so much history and cultural significance to explore as well. I think that there does need to be an understanding of tarot as a tool, just as a knife is a tool, or a rolling pin is a tool, or a needle is a tool, and they can be used in a number of ways. What we're looking at here is how we are using the tarot to empower ourselves. And I believe that we can do that within our tarot readings by having a holistic perspective and approach. So what I like to consider is how I can read with a combination of my understanding and knowledge that I have gained over the years, having read around traditional meanings and a number of authors' perspectives, etc., as well as the history of tarot and the context of tarot, and then pairing that with my understanding of art, for instance, because that was something that I engaged with a lot when I was younger and I studied. Then also pulling in aspects of things I learned at university, and I studied the archetypes and I studied Carl Jung. You gain layers by approaching something with a kind of dynamic, multi-dimensional approach. I also want to touch on areas of improving our intuition, trusting that intuition, and how we can utilize all of these kind of strings to our bows, as it were, to support us to read tarot in an empowering way. Because reading, I believe, can still be somewhat predictive in nature and still be empowering, so long as it's not approached in this fatalist kind of way that this is the only outcome, or that, this is fated in some way and that there's nothing we can do about it. Rather, I see it like a snapshot in time. And I've talked a bit about this before, and I've heard other readers talk about this. It's almost like this is a potential outcome for a particular situation that you are looking at right now, and it's like a snapshot in time. But if you were to look at it in a few days, or also if you were to consider some other information that you might not actually have, the reading would be very different. And so those are some of the nuances. Again, I love that word, of course, because it's just so appropriate for so many situations. Because once you understand there's nuance involved, you can understand that there isn't just one likely or potential outcome. There are myriad, and that sort of likely outcome may change with time and with situations developing. And also, I do believe that we can, in part, not even totally, but we are able to control how we respond. Perhaps not all people, depending on mental health conditions, etc., but to a certain extent we have control over ourselves, but that's really it. And we don't necessarily have control over our minds, and we can try to gain more control over how we approach things, but we are also a product of our environment and our upbringing and our culture, a product of society. So there are a number of factors to consider. There's multiple approaches, and I like to consider that there's just a myriad of elements, aspects at play, and we're never even going to know all of those either. And so it's sort of understanding that no matter how much experience you have, you're still coming at this. I like to think of myself as still coming at this with a beginner's mindset and with curiosity, as a student or as a child with playful curiosity. And so I really want to encourage you to sort of open your mind a little bit. Again, I've said this recently, not that your mind is closed, I'm not suggesting that, but to have a kind of expansive mindset and approach to your work with the tarot, so that there's multiple things that can be considered at once, and that potentially conflicting ideas might actually be simultaneously true. So tarot could be used in a way to frighten somebody into purchasing another reading, or purchasing some kind of cleansing or banishing or exorcism, if
a reader was perhaps not so ethical, and that does happen. And there's also obviously many scammers within the community, which I'm sure most of you will be aware of. But it is definitely advisable to have your wits about you, and when you are working with a tarot reader for the first time, do a little bit of research and find out who they are, and make sure that they are approaching it with respect, and that they have done their due diligence, and that they've spent some time studying, that they've read for others, and that they have, good reviews, and they're generally approaching their work with an ethical perspective. And you can look at their code of ethics as well, is really handy. So if tarot is a tool, then we can utilize it to empower us, but it's just, how do we do that? So what can tarot do for us in a reading? It can give us clarity and support. It can give us new ideas about how to approach a situation. It can give us an idea or a perspective that we've not considered before. And it can also show us some areas in our life that may be impacted by something, an event or changes. And some of those things might be, again, out of control. And also some of the specifics might not be so obvious to you if this is a reading for yourself or even for someone else. And oftentimes we're talking around emotions, and we're talking around thoughts and behaviors and patterns, limiting beliefs and things that are holding us back. And sometimes you'll find you might experience a reading or give a reading where potentially specifics of an actual occurrence or event or a circumstance aren't even delved into that much, but it's a kind of essence of understanding how we are moving through that, or how the other person is moving through that, or what that means to them, and the meaning that we glean from certain events and certain circumstances occurring. But oftentimes there are big life moments that are depicted within the tarot, and it is designed in that way to kind of show an archetypal tarot journey. So that is the Fool's journey, and you can see the archetypes throughout the tarot, and you can do more learning into the various archetypes that are depicted within the tarot. Also, you can work on understanding how these archetypes show up in your life. You can also work on embodying those as well to understand them more. So there's a lot that you can do with that. Oftentimes the major arcana is considered to be large life moments, really pivotal, big changes, or, milestones in your life. Whereas the minor arcana are considered to be kind of everyday moments, but it doesn't necessarily always work out like that, because oftentimes something that is quite small will have a big impact upon your life. So when we are working with tarot, there are a number of ways in which we can get support and empowerment from the tarot, and really ultimately see a bigger picture and assess how we might discover new solutions for situations and problems and challenges that we are in, and how we might approach something differently, how we might understand someone else slightly better. And these are sort of questions we can ask ourselves as well. And I think as long as we are approaching the tarot and our tarot readings with that curiosity and that understanding that we're not going to have all the answers, and just being okay with that, being at peace with that. If we're approaching the tarot in this way, I think the readings are always going to become a lot richer, a lot deeper, and a lot more meaningful. And by extension, then they are going to be empowering. You're going to leave the table, or they're going to leave your table, feeling like they have some tools to take away with them. Even if there was an element of some psychic downloads came through, you had the intuition because you work intuitively and you read in that way. If you're offering tools to support or ways in which the querent might mitigate a certain situation that's going on, considering the cards in front of you, that can be extremely empowering. And rather than sending someone away with just a doom and gloom message, which I'm sure none of you would do, because, if you're here, I'm sure you already know a lot about reading tarot for yourself and others, and would never do that kind of reading. But it's just an extreme example. I think if we are able to provide that kind of perspective of nuance and an open curiosity, that can be really supportive. And also, I think we'll talk more about the structure of a reading, but having a dialogue, an actual conversation with the person that you're reading for, if it's between you and a client or just a friend, even just having a conversation with them, not being afraid to ask them about a specific situation that they want to be read for, and not being afraid to ask them how they found the reading, and even within it, what is speaking to them, what do they notice about the cards, what pops out to them. That can be really, really supportive both for you and them. As a witch, I'm primarily solitary. However, I do run in certain circles in person and online, and being in a personal co-created space with beautiful like-minded souls, a practice that I absolutely love is a listening partnership, and that is underpinned with the idea that whoever we're listening with already has the knowledge, the wisdom, the answers within them to seek for themselves inside. And it's having that faith as you listen to them, obviously coming to the table with non-judgment, openness, love, support, respect, and just listening to them, to be that ear, understanding that they have the tools within them to actually get themselves through this situation, to move through this themselves as well, will do wonders for you if you are reading for others, and also for yourself, just to know that this will unfold in a way that you will be able to cope with. And I think especially if you're coming to the tarot, you are going to be someone most likely who is understanding that there is nuance and understanding that there are multiple ways to look at a situation. I think that there is a lot of gold to be mined within that. And also as a tool, of course, for greater introspection and learning about ourselves and seeing how far we've come, growth, perspective, looking at our journey, of course, shadow work. I know that there's an argument for and against using tarot for shadow work, because potentially if you're reading for something that you consider to be a shadow and you know about it already, then that's not technically a shadow, in quotation marks, but a shadow can become apparent to you and then you can work with it, or you can work with the tarot to discover more shadow areas and unpick them as well, because I believe it runs deep and we can always work on those things that challenge us, and that those things that we find problematic and challenging within ourselves and we see them with others and they just trigger something. I think that that is common for a lot of people, and I do think that everybody naturally projects at some point or other, and I think it is a kind of a natural human trait, to be honest. I think it's about relating to others. I think that it's something that we naturally do, whether for good or bad, because we are associating ourselves, we are social creatures. But once we're aware of that, and once we understand that doesn't make us a baddie, we can just introspectively look at that and we can start to understand more about ourselves that way. And then that is so empowering, because then we do have the tools then to support ourselves and to unpick these things and to do better. When you know better, you do better. To unpick behaviors, unpick the thoughts and the feelings, the emotions behind those things, and things that are triggering us, the things that really get to us in certain situations. When we start to come to tarot with this mindset and from this perspective, this can be absolutely life-changing when you are reading tarot for others. Next, I want to talk about how to ask the right questions. And this is something that is discussed quite widely within tarot circles, because we are able to glean more information and support ourselves better as magical practitioners when we do ask the right questions. However, this is not information that most people in our society who are not exposed to the occult will really know how to do, unless they go and get readings often, and they will have been maybe informed by their reader, that these are the kinds of questions that you can ask. I think oftentimes as well, there's that expectation that a tarot reader is also going to be psychic, and that's not necessarily the case. And in fact, most readers will stipulate whether or not they consider their tarot readings to be a psychic divinatory reading or not. And also some others may be mediums as well. So certain ancestral spirits, familiar spirits who have passed on, who are in the spirit world, may come through to them and have a message for you. That can be experienced within a tarot reading if someone is a medium, but that's not always the case. So every tarot reader will have their own certain approach, I guess, and it's understanding what your approach is. Now, as I've said, for me, I do feel that tarot readings can encompass a lot of different elements and aspects and come from various approaches. So in terms of tarot reading styles, approaches, there are so many different styles of reading, but generally they can be broken up into traditional occult reading, which will draw on a lot of the traditional meanings from established and traditional tarot decks like the Smith Waite and the Thoth deck, for instance, by Aleister Crowley, and it will incorporate the associations of the Kabbalah and astrology, numerology, etc. There's also a lot of readers these days who say that they read intuitively, which is what I say, but I do incorporate a lot of those traditional meanings as well, and I still read and educate myself. And essentially, an intuitive reader will be tapping into a sense of the energy that they get from the person that they're reading for, as well as the cards in front of them, and they may have a kind of intuitive hit or download, and that's sort of how it feels when messages come through. The reading will focus more on the feelings, the emotions, the imagery, what the story is telling. It may be more spiritual in terms of guidance. Again, they can be used together. Then there's also, of course, predictive readings, which I do believe a lot of tarot readers do focus in this way. So to predict potential outcomes and answer questions. And a lot of the questions, obviously, that people come to tarot readers with is often the yes, no. And that is something that is just not easy to read for. It's just too narrow, really, but also too broad in the sense that you're not really going to be able to empower anyone very much with that. I mean, it can be done. I do it. I do it for myself as well. So there are ways to do it, but that's a whole other video. But for the purposes of this video, I would suggest avoiding those questions and instead asking questions around the energy of a situation or how you might go about changing something or working on something or improving something, etc. And I do have a list of really great tarot questions that you can ask for yourself, or if you are going into a reading with someone else, that you can ask them, or that you can suggest that your clients ask you in your readings. There are timestamps below, so you'll be able to find the timestamp for those if you're interested in seeing what those questions that I have put together are. Often those readings, I'd say, are very, very popular because people want to know about their work, their career, money, love, of course, relationships, etc. There is Archetypal tarot, and that leans heavily into the archetypes and Carl Jung's work. I definitely incorporate this style of reading within my tarot practice, and it really supports understanding yourself and habits and patterns and how you're growing and developing throughout your journey and different sort of psychological nuances and patterns and behaviors, etc. And this can also be utilized for shadow work readings as well, to dive deeper into those psychological recesses of the mind, dive deeper into those shadows that are coming up and exploring those hidden parts of ourselves that are always there and getting a little bit deeper. And also it can be utilized within a therapeutic environment as well. So if there are tarot counselors or counselors who utilize tarot within their counseling therapy sessions, so you can seek out a therapist who also includes tarot if that's something that will support you. So let's talk a little bit about how to ask the right questions. So we have touched on avoiding those yes and no questions, and instead to focus on the energy of a situation and try to get more information about something, a bigger picture of something that potentially is unknown or that, we don't have a full picture of. By asking more open-ended questions, we can get to this. So you can also open up that question by asking around something that could have potential outcomes, potential obstacles, potential opportunities, potential avenues of growth, potential areas of improvement, options that you may be considering. So you might have like a number of choices about where you go to study for school, for instance. If you're going to college or university, you might have a number of choices. So something like that very simply could be part of your question for the tarot, and you can pull a card or a number of cards for that option and see how that sort of plays out for you. There's other ways that you can ask these questions and make them more about your higher soul's growth and evolution and what you need to know right now, or what your higher self or the divine is wanting you to understand right now, wanting you to process, like what's becoming apparent right now, what's coming through right now, what the energies for a certain situation are, etc. So as I said, there will be some sample questions for tarot readings towards the end. Now let's talk about intuition and developing intuition and trusting your intuition. Intuition is so important when you are reading tarot for yourself or anyone else, and when you're reading cards in general and any divinatory practices. I'm sure if you are watching this channel, been here for a while, this is something you're familiar with and something that you have worked on and are continuing to work on. Essentially, intuition is something that everybody has. It's something that everybody has access to, just as I think many people do believe this within our community, and I do myself, that anyone has the ability to tap into their psychic skills, clairaudience, clairgustance, clairsentience, clairvoyance, etc. And that's a whole other video to go into that. But to tap into your intuition, it involves connection, which is something that I feel is inherent and innate to the practice of witchcraft and magic, this work that we are doing here. Connection is something that you're probably familiar with and that you've been working on anyway. This is something that we can develop over time with an open mind and a presence of awareness, mindfulness practice, and we can develop this through meditation and also through taking time out of our day to engage with breath work and to create little rituals for ourselves. So there are many ways to do this. There are also targeted exercises, and there are some amazing books I've talked about on this channel before that you can go and read to develop more around this area and to strengthen your intuition, and many of the exercises that you can tap into for psychic development also support with your intuition as well. Books like Psychic Witch by Matt Oren, The Keys to Perception by Eva Dominguez Jr., many other books as well. Okay, so let's have a little reprieve and take a look at the Awakened Soul Oracle deck. This is another deck that I've wanted for so long. Amazing box. And look at the bumblebee. With the bumblebees have an amazing explanation here. Ethony always goes into so much detail. You've got a soul story there, awakened meaning, shadow meaning, affirmation, and personal reflections, as well as symbol and keywords. So this is going to be such a great deck, I think, to use for self-care, self-love, anything to do with your spiritual journey really. And as you're traveling through life, you could utilize this with any area of your life. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. I love that. That is so true. Bringing in that Carl Jung reference as well. The illustrator for this is Danielle Mulligan, created in 2020. Yeah, how beautiful is this? This is something you could put into your tarot journal. These decks also came with some beautiful stickers for the Cosmic Wisdom Tarot as well. Again, we've got beautiful backs. It's a bigger deck, of course, like most Oracle decks, and you have the silver gilding. I know some people don't go for gilding, but I just love it. And I'm not sure what you call this cardstock itself. I mean, it's the same sort of thickness, but I'm not sure what you would call this finish. It's not the rose petal that like sticks, but it is matte. I really like it. With the Cosmic Wisdom, this has just shuffled so beautifully, like a dream. Nothing is sticking at all. It's just so beautifully made. I think probably one of the best production on a tarot deck. The fact that the cardstock is really good quality, but not too thick either. I'm so looking forward to using this for daily draws and just for every single thing. And the fact that it is obviously like a Rider-Waite-Smith clone in a sense. So you have these beautiful backs with the bumblebees. Let's have a little look. If this is completely brand new to you, you're going to want to start to connect in, to draw your attention and awareness within. Really begin to get quiet and sit and listen. If you have practiced some grounded techniques and centering, working with spirits, etc., then you'll know how to connect in and to listen to other beings as well. But it's really important to quiet down and connect to the spirit of yourself. You are also a spirit. So it's that connection within and to beings, spirits, entities without. Really, it involves doing this over time and practicing it and trusting what comes through. Any little insights or anything that becomes aware or clarity you get, any little niggly feelings. Often your intuition is quiet and calm. It's not loud or pushy or aggressive and panicky. It's definitely not that. It will be calm with a sense of knowing when you hear it. Often softly. That's how I think we lose touch with it, because when we're children we have an innate connection to our inner selves and our inner worlds, our imagination, play. This all starts to fade away a little bit as we become much more present in consensus reality, and it's also clear in the shifts from the different brainwave states. It is really important to take that time each day just to sit down, and this can involve some herbal tea. You can work with a herbal ally that you are close to, or a tea that you love, just something really simple. Just want to connect in, breathe and listen, and that's the basis. I have a video on meditation if you wanted to go and listen to that, and there are practices in the grounding video as well that you might find supportive. With this, trusting what comes up first, it gets easier, but often you will learn to understand that you can trust the voice when you hear it and you know what it is. And you might have responses in different ways. So you might receive thoughts, feelings, emotions, sense of actual knowing or awareness. You might have a physical sensation, understanding how you work and how these messages come through. And also if you're connecting to a spirit, they may come through differently as well. And so that all comes with time. But if you keep a journal of this can really, really support. You can keep like a record of when you have successfully identified something that you have been intuitively aware of, and then maybe it comes to pass, or maybe it becomes very relevant and very clear, or maybe you were just correct about something you had a hunch about. And often we do all get that awareness of something, like you walk into a space and you know someone's had an argument or all of those things. And often people will go to stay in old houses and they'll feel that there's something not quite so nice about that, and that's all about the energy. But again, we are talking about here both going inwards, listening to your inner self as well as the outer, but you're not going to really be able to discern the outer if you're not going inwards first, and that's why we start there. Trusting that, being really, really clear about when you're coming to the tarot with a question, who do you want to ask? Are you connecting in purely with your higher self, in which case you may wish to address yourself or at least have that intention? Or is it that you are wanting to communicate with a particular deity, spirit or ancestor? Perhaps you are going into a general tarot reading and you want to call on the divine and greater universe. And so just get really clear with that, and having that intentional practice really, really supports it. Coming to your practice with a sense of openness and noticing with curiosity, like I said at the start, without projecting or attaching to an outcome that is desirable to you or what you want to happen. Try not to think too much about it. Just take it for what it is and enjoy the journey. We could do a whole video on intuition, but I think I've spoken enough about it for now, but that's how you can learn to tap into it. And in terms of trusting your intuition, it's really, really important to understand the card meanings and to trust your inner soul voice, to be able to hear that, to be able to connect in, understand how it sounds, trust it. When those first impressions come up, be open-minded as well, because also there may be things that you will find that you didn't quite receive correctly or you didn't quite understand them, and you'll find out that actually it was a slightly different message that was coming through, but you misinterpreted it potentially, and that is possible too. So all of these help to refine our practice, especially if we are taking stock of them, if we're recording them. They can help us to improve our skills, refine our practice, and support us no end with our reading and our work as magical beings and practitioners. Also to practice regularly. So to be strengthening your intuition, you really want to be tapping in, ideally on a daily basis, but as much as you can, as often as you can. And this doesn't have to look like a whole meditation routine. It can be a few breaths before you start your day, you know, a few intentional breaths where you're listening in. Take that time to listen to yourself. And often this is a real way to feel magic in your life as well. I feel like I've always been a storyteller myself, and I feel that my imagination has always been quite wild. And I think as a result, I've never felt that I struggled to hear or understand my inner voice, because I have such a wild kind of inner world anyway. I knew it quite well and I never lost that. So hanging on to those, I do think there is so much magic in play. And if you are approaching something with that childlike curiosity, again, approaching it with the idea of play, you can learn so much. And there are so many creative ideas as well that you can find in books and on YouTube, and that other practitioners have done, and that can support you to get excited about what you're doing, and so many different ways for working with the tarot as well. So you can keep a journal of your favorite ways to work outside of the box and keep things fresh and new, and then it will continue to evolve, and it will be really beautiful and profound for you. Now let's talk about preparing for a reading and creating a sacred space for that reading. Now, many of you will already know how to do this, so please feel free to skip. But if this is new to you, then it might just help. If we are able to create a little ritual for ourselves around creating a intentional sacred space for ourselves, and you may already have a number of these within your home as well if you have altars, but creating an altar or a space where you can perform your readings. I actually often perform my tarot readings in bed or on my bed, and I have altars around my room, so it's all part of my sacred space. I might pull cards in the morning, I might pull cards in the evening, or I might pull cards in the day as and when I'm called to. I do have an altar space for Lilith where I read if I'm connecting to Lilith. Often I will put cards up for readings on my other altar. Creating that ritual, cleansing the space, cleansing yourself. I have a video on that. Collecting things that you find are supportive for you in your practice. So if you like to work with crystals, if you like to work with natural stones, roots or rocks or twigs or berries or herbal allies, etc., you can create a space that is intentional and supportive for you to help create that connection as well, to help, just like a ritual does, put you in that headspace and automatically get you into that zone where you are able to tap in to your intuition, as we've just talked about. Once you have a space, you're going to want to prepare yourself. I find that taking a few deep breaths and centering, I have a video on this, grounding is really supportive. You can do a longer or a shorter version of this. You may wish to do a meditation practice beforehand if you have time. I don't always do this, but sometimes I do. I will always center and ground in a way, whether or not that takes for me 5 minutes or a minute. It depends on how much time I have, but taking that time to take a sacred pause and just go inward and take a few deep breaths can really help you to be present and mindful and grounded, to allow those intuitive hits to come through, to allow yourself that moment of space to tap in, create some quiet around yourself so you can listen in. As I talked about before, you're going to want to be really intentional with your practice, and when you're preparing for a reading, that's part of it. So intentionally decide who you are connecting to and asking for guidance from. Is it your higher self? Is it the divine, macrocosm? Is it the universe? Is it a specific deity, a personified deity, an ancestor? Is it a spirit that you work with? Do connect in, take a moment to address them. Perhaps you are performing a reading within a ritual. You may wish to invoke them beforehand, make an offering, which is what I tend to do with Lilith. Again, this is something that you can choose your process for. To light a candle, be intentional with everything that you do, and you can create a little ritual around this for yourself as well. You want to know what you're coming to the cards to ask, and if you're not quite sure how to formulate that question, that's when you can just spend a bit bit of time beforehand, considering before you ask the question. In the past, I've noticed that if I've been rushed, I have a question in mind, but then sort of realize as I'm shuffling, it's not quite the right question. So I kind of have to re-cleanse my deck and ask the question again, because I feel that my deck is listening to me, the spirit of my deck, and I have a relationship. Cultivating a relationship with the decks that you work with is really important too. I do consider them to be alive in themselves. That's, I think, probably quite common within our community, because a lot of people do talk about the ways in which decks will speak and will read, and a common practice to perform a deck interview, for instance, when you receive a new deck, when you purchase a new deck. And if you are new to tarot as well, ways in which you can cultivate a connection to your tarot deck include holding it in your hands, feeling the energy of it, picking up on that, sensing the energy, speaking to your deck, taking time to reflect with your deck. Some people like to sleep with it under their pillow or next to their bed, spend time shuffling it. Obviously, you want to shuffle it thoroughly before you use it first. I often will shuffle it overhand first, then I will spread all of the cards out on the floor, do a really deep shuffle before I shuffle overhand again. Before I do a reading, I will shuffle. I do cleanse my decks with smoke as well as sound, and I also cleanse my decks with my breath. I tend to do smoke and my breath when I'm at home, and occasionally sound as well. But if I'm out and about, I will tend to use my breath. Maybe do this a few times if I feel it needs to, but again, it's very intuitive, so you want to do it however it feels right for you. It's also very important if you're reading for multiple people, if you're in an event or something. I think that having that sacred space and that little pause in between, also being able to cleanse yourself of any previous energies, as well as your deck, cleansing your deck of those before you then go ahead and read for someone else, is really important. Having a little break as well. Cleansing your deck is important, and knowing what questions you want to ask. I feel like occasionally I've gotten confusing readings because I've maybe asked a question in not the best way and then changed the question halfway through, and I sometimes feel that that is not helpful. So I like to be really, really intentional, and even if I'm in a rush, if I haven't quite got the question in my head that I want to ask, I will consider it. And if I'm going out of the house, I have a deck in my bag anyway, and I often take another deck with me. I have like a mini deck in my bag, a Smith Waite. I might take another deck that I'm working with at the moment, or whatever calls to me. And that's another thing that you can layer into this practice, which is intentionally choosing your decks. On Tarot Tube, if you have been watching for a while, you'll have seen these wonderful hashtags that go round, and they're so full of joy. I love them. Ways to compartmentalize or characterize your decks, how people see their decks as different personalities. It's so much fun. Honestly, decks do have a particular voice. I have several decks that are just fierce, and they really will be quite sharp. If you are not in a space to kind of receive that, they might not be the right deck for that moment, and as you practice with different decks, I think that it will become clearer, distinct voices. You can choose a deck intuitively with your question. You're going to want to be intentional with your questions, as I said, as well as any spreads that you're going to use. So now let's discuss actually conducting a reading for yourself or for a client. We're also going to talk about empowering yourself or the client as you are reading. We are going to touch on some intentional questions that are open-ended, that are clear, specific, etc., and that they are aligned and sort of intentionally crafted to allow you to interpret them with as much ability to be able to be empowering as possible. We'll also touch on spreads and layouts as well that are common. You want to be really intentional with everything that you've done, and that's why we've prepared for our tarot reading. We've selected our deck, we've had a moment of sacred pause, we've gone inwards, we've centered, we've grounded, we are in a sort of meditative sacred space. You are able then to shift, rather than being in the beta, awake and conscious, alert, thinking brainwave state. You're going to be more of an alpha brainwave state, where you're going to be really physically, mentally relaxed, and maybe even dropping into theta slightly. So coming down into that deep, creative, dreamlike, meditative state. It might be possible that you shift in and out of that brainwave state, but you don't really need to worry about it, because it's something that will sort of happen naturally if you're following these steps. I hope that this is obvious, but you are going to want to, if you're reading for someone else, have practiced for for a while, you know, and to be confident with your readings. I think it's very easy for someone to say, oh, this person should have at least a year's worth of experience or 2 years worth of learning and then reading for people. I mean, you can, if you want to, and you make it very clear, if everyone is consenting, you can conduct readings for people for free and still be learning out of the book if that's what you want to do. So I spent a really long time reading and learning and practicing with the tarot cards on my own before I ever read for anybody else. But I do think that when you've learned for a certain amount of time and you've read for yourself for years, it's really beneficial to actually start reading for others as soon as you can, for family and friends, for any strangers you know who understand that you're learning and that you might be referring to a book or whatever during a reading, if that's something you want to do, to practice with people. As long as it's a consenting arrangement, then that's absolutely fine. I think practicing on friends and family, which is basically what I started to do when I first started to read for people, but I've never read with a book.
Modern Love Tarot, Exploring the Many Facets of Love by Ethony. Again, you have this clasp here. The box is really sturdy. The art is by Lucy Morningstar. Lucy actually has her own channel, tapping channel, I believe. The cards in the Modern Love Tarot represent love in all of its glory, including diverse representations of family, love, and people. This deck can help people navigate their relationships with themselves and the people they love in their lives, whether they need help healing from past relationships, navigating current ones, or finding a new lasting one. So for each card, you have a general love meaning, single love meaning, ready for dating, a committed relationship, a struggling relationship, the end of a relationship. And with each one, of course, you get the keywords, which is fabulous. And of course, beautiful colour images, which I love. And look, just the attention to detail is second to none, of course. Love is beautiful in all its forms. And this is just, again, just such a beautiful affirmation. You could put this on your altar, on a love altar. You could put this in your grimoire. You could keep it in the deck, all in its glory. I love it. This is a deck that I've wanted for so long. So I'm so thrilled to have been sent this. And thank you so much to Ethony. And there is a companion course when you get the deck. Here is another interview spread for your tarot decks. Look at these bags. Do they not just feel so beautiful? This is gilding. I cannot wait to use this deck, honestly. Like, I have a few love decks now and it really depends on the mood, but this is a deck that I think you could use for everyday life as well, because love is all encompassing and all around us all the time. It's really important in our lives. Without love, so it's not just relationship love, it's love of all people and your community, family and friends. I do think having a deck that you can use for romantic love as well as other love, including self-love as well, is really powerful. And I think this is a winner if you're looking for a love deck. So let's just take a look.
There are occasions when I think oracle decks really lend themselves, whatever the theme is. There are certain oracle decks that really require that book because some of them are quite specific if they're like tailored to a story or something like that. But mostly I don't really refer to the guidebooks at all in my practice when I'm reading for myself, even if it's an oracle deck, because I do like to take those messages intuitively. I think when it comes to tarot decks, if you are a tarot collector and you like getting different decks, that's amazing because the art is so diverse and you can just have so many different representations and artistic depictions of a particular card. It's so rich to dive into the artwork there and to interpret and look at what you can see and to tell a story with the art that you see. That can be really powerful for broadening your ideas and your scope around what a card could mean. Just allow you to be freer, more open to interpretations and to downloads as well as they come to you. The way in which you will structure your reading will also depend on how you are reading for someone or yourself. I mean, if it's for yourself, it's obviously you're in a place where you can do that and it's private and you're able to read however you want. I think that this is a practice that a lot of people do these days, is not necessarily utilize a spread, but to ask one or more questions questions and to allow cards to fall out as they may after shuffling. That is something I do like to do. Otherwise, you might wish to spread your cards out and to run your hands over the top of them and to see where your fingers feel a tingle and where you feel drawn, feeling the answers and then pulling a card that way. That could be really, really nice for beginners because it allows you again to sort of learn to trust your intuition, the senses that you get around that. If you are reading for somebody else, you may be reading in person for them. If it's someone you know, it might be at a party or at someone's house or at your house, probably going to be a lot less formal, and it may be that you're reading for someone for free that you know, and that's a really, really nice informal way to go about it as well. But I would encourage some kind of energetic exchange, even if that energetic exchange is just feedback. That can be really, really helpful. You may be reading for a client in person, again at a party, at a fair or an event, or you may be in someone's house, or they may be in your house or in your professional space. Oftentimes a client is sitting across from you, and so you will have to be showing the cards upside down to you, and so that can be a little bit awkward sometimes. So sometimes I like to be on a corner of a table so you can both see the cards, but equally I think that most people understand if you want to just turn it around to look at it the right way around. You may have quite naturally developed a way in which you like to shuffle your cards, select the cards. You also might be recording a video message. You may be sending an emailed written tarot reading for someone, maybe conducting a live tarot reading for them, in which case you'll be holding up cards most likely. So whatever works for you, whatever works for your client, and again, you can make the spreads as informal or as formal as you want them to be. If you are creating a business for yourself, you want to make it clear what kind of readings you're offering in terms of the structure, the length, what kind of spreads you're offering. Oftentimes readers will have a specific type of reading for a specific subject, but also will have spread setups within those. In terms of how you like to shuffle the cards, this is really, really personal. Some people like to split the deck several ways after shuffling. I personally shuffle overhand because I find it easier, and otherwise I bend my cards when I riffle shuffle, and I can never reverse riffle shuffle. I do tend to, as much as I really, really like some decks that are bigger, I really prefer hand over hand shuffling with decks that are much bigger than the Smith weight myself, because they are generally too big for my hands. I often find myself leaning towards a Smith weight or a Smith weight clone, something that is representational of the archetypes and something that is representational of Fool's Journey. It's like the Light Seers or the Cosmic Wisdom Tarot. The way in which that I like to read for other people is I cleanse myself, then I'll center and ground. I will make sure that I'm prepared mentally. I will set up the space, maybe do a bit of smoke cleansing. If I'm unable to do that, if I'm at someone else's house, maybe we'll do a bit of sound cleansing. In a pinch, I might clap around the space. I might ding a bell or a glass, or I definitely blow my decks. I kind of naturally just blow on them, even if I've smoke cleansed them or sound cleansed them as well. I like to do that, especially because I've probably likely read for myself with that deck before, in between having used it for someone else, and I like to cleanse them thoroughly before and after readings, and especially in between reading for different people. So then I will shuffle the deck to neutralize it. I will ask the querent what it is that they would like a reading for. Try to encourage them to ask those open-ended questions for their highest good, to help them to learn, help them to problem solve, help them to think about something in a different way, help them to create a solution for themselves, approach a problem in a different way, something that is nuanced and empowering for them, things that perhaps they haven't really realized about themselves, or the ways in which they're behaving, or the ways in which they're showing up, and some of the repeating patterns, behaviors, something that is going to shed light on something else. So very much like that hermit energy, you know, with the lantern. Whilst I am talking to them, I'll be shuffling. When I intuitively feel that it's time, I will pass them the deck and I will ask them to shuffle the cards for themselves. I ask them to close their eyes and to get in tune with themselves, to shuffle the deck and to do what they want with it in terms of allowing for the reading to kind of unfold. What I say is that a couple of cards may fall out, and if they do, we can take a look at those cards, and usually one card or maybe two might pop out. If a whole slew of cards jumps out, we will put them back in. I will ask the divine for just one of those cards. More often than not, I'm amazed how frequently the card that comes out is a court card, and I know exactly that is meant to be a significator card for them. So frequently it will also mirror exactly the question that they're asking and the energy with which they're approaching the question as well. So I often think the ways in which they phrase their question really matters. As I said, I may ask them to reconsider the way that they're asking the question so that we can get the most information and juice and value for them out of the reading. But I think oftentimes you can see how the energy with which they inquire after a certain topic, you can see that mirrored within their significator card. That's something that I've experienced a lot, and I think it's really, really interesting. And so drawing on that significator card within the reading that you do can provide so much fruitful, introspective knowledge to explore, and it really, in my experience, it has provided a lot of support for the client because it really helps them to feel seen and heard, and they really, really feel like they actually have their question answered in a way that means that they can go away and actually make some changes or do something differently or start to change the way that they're thinking about something, which is the basic point of this whole idea that we're empowering who we're reading for. If they've got that significator card, sometimes the card doesn't pop out, and so that's absolutely fine. Some people put the cards down, pull the first one from the top. They might ask me what to do, and I'll say, whenever you're ready, you can put the cards down. If you like, you can start laying them down. Generally, that's an invitation for them. I have had a few people say they don't really want to, and that's fine. So they hand the deck back to me and I will continue with the reading. Depending on what the question is, we'll lay out 3 or 4 because sometimes jumpers come and I allow those to come out. So it really depends. If we end up getting an extra jumper, then it's 4. And we do a row of 4 or a row of 3. And then beneath that, we'll go deeper into certain aspects of what the reading is. So the first line is an overall. The second line might be about the energy of that person. The next line might be the energy of what it is they're inquiring after. Obviously, it depends very much. It's basically a very kind of fluid, intuitive, again, that word is just overusing it. It's a really fluid, organic process and way in which to read tarot, and it does not include a spread. And I know the Celtic Cross can be really, really supportive. I don't generally tend to do it for people. If people want me to, I will. It's not the way that I work primarily when I'm reading tarot. And I find this works really well because it tends to give several viewpoint potentials as well, not just potential outcomes, but ways in which to look at a situation. So you're kind of seeing from all angles and you're able to sort of think outside the box in a sense. I think a lot of this can sound rather abstract because we're talking generally and I'm trying to explain what I do in a general way. I would definitely advise ahead of time that you have a plan for how you're going to structure the reading, whether you're going to do a fluid interpretive reading like this or whether you're going to use a spread that you've conceived ahead of time, either one that you use regularly or one that you have planned for this particular client or for yourself, whatever you're dealing with. I do have a shadow spread that I absolutely love to use for myself. I'm happy to use that for clients as well. Within a reading, I will always invite reflection and feedback throughout. It's very much a conversation. It's got a flow. There's a dynamic to it. I also allow myself to spend time looking at each card. I don't feel the need to rush in to speak straight away. And that is something that I think I've heard so many people say, that they feel like they need to just start talking. And oftentimes I think a really, really good way to approach it is to say the name of the card and say what you see. This might be someone you're reading for who's vaguely aware of tarot but has never really seen the cards and doesn't really know what they're looking at. So you can literally describe what you're seeing within the context of the question, and also, very importantly, the context with which it is placed and the surroundings, the spread, the way it looks, the patterns you see coming up, whether there's repeated patterns, symbols, repeated visuals, like animals might be repeated or certain things like that, certain colors, suit. You might be asked a question about love, but there's just a predominance of one's energy. And this may indicate that it's a really, really fast paced, kind of fiery, sort of passionate whirlwind kind of affair. Obviously, that's very basic analogy, but you see what I'm saying? Like, you can really, really get a sense by looking at patterns that you see. And then also you can work in a very sort of folk cartomancy way by looking at the directional patterns, so from top to bottom, left to right, diagonally as well, to see what patterns are repeating and coming up. Always allow for a kind of debriefing at the end beyond your final words. I think there is really an art to timing tarot reading, so that is something that you're going to want to practice, because again, it's very, very personal. And what you want to be making sure that you do is providing a space for the client to facilitate that self-discovery and that reflection. So they may need time to discuss these things with you beyond the scope of your interpretation and reading. So you really want to hold that space for the clients. It is just as much a space for them to process the reading as it is for you to read. Don't give them a half an hour reading and spend 29 minutes on interpreting it and then say, okay, we've come to the end of the reading, right, I have to sign off now. That is just not going to provide them with what they need. That's what the reading is about. Some readings may not allow for this, but ideally you want to be providing them with, if not answers, because that obviously is very specific and that's probably not going to be likely possible, you may be able to provide a number of feasible, likely outcomes if the circumstances continue this way, but however, things may change. And if you want to pull further cards to clarify, you can do that too. You can allow for that, like some extra bonus cards or some oracle cards at the end as well. You can work that into your plan for reading for others. What's really great about reading for yourself as well is you can practice all this with yourself. So however you like to read, you may notice that after reading for yourself in a shadow spread, you need way more time. And so if you then are building up a repertoire of readings to offer others, you may decide in your shadow work reading for others that you need an extra half an hour on the end for that extra debriefing time and that extra feedback time, because as well as providing, well, an answer to the question in quotation marks, we'll say answer, but solutions to their question or feasible possible outcomes, you also want to provide them with opportunities for development or areas of inquisition. So maybe further questions that they want to go away and consider for themselves. So if it's about choosing between a few universities to go to, you may have extra questions for them about the ways in which they like to learn. The universities that they have applied for have similar courses, but the learning environments and also the social environments might be very different, especially if, say, it's a city university in the heart of a city and based all over the place compared to a university that's on one campus in the middle of nowhere. They're going to have a really, really different experience as well as social experience. Weighing all of those things up, they're going to want to go away and really consider some of those points, And so this, again, really, really kind of crude learning analogy, but there could be multiple nuanced ways in which you would invite them to reflect and work through some of the topics that you've explored through the reading. And of course, that's down to them. You're going to ask them how the reading was and ask for reflection and feedback. Give them those tools for self-discovery and self-inquiry, and may even wish to provide them with some ideas for meditation and mind calming and mindfulness, etc., and keeping a journal and things like that. You may wish to talk them through some of those things. If they're having a really tough time, you may talk to them about some protections that they might do. Just provide them with the tools that you feel are necessary and that could support them with whatever they're dealing with, facilitate them back into their lives, as it were. So by providing those extra tools, it really can help to round out the reading with a full feeling so that they don't just leave with just one answer to the question. They've left with a feeling that they've explored the topic. You've come at it from a subjective, impartial place, examined the ways in which they are showing up in this situation, given them prompts to support them to look into the ways in which they're showing up and how that might be impacting the situation, and how they may wish to look at some of those patterns and how they may wish to address them, how they may wish to move forward. But you're also very much facilitating the experience and then giving them tools to go away and to continue the work on their own, essentially. Some spreads, layouts, and some sample questions. So common spreads that I enjoy doing when it's for myself and for a quick reading: energy, obstacle, and advice for the day. You could do situation or obstacle, action to take, and then the outcome, the situation, the challenge, the outcome. Of course, you may wish to tailor a spread as well, or you may wish to use a classic spread like a Celtic cross. Some sample questions for tarot readings that I have written include: what does my higher self want me to be aware of now? How can I support myself with whatever the situation is? What potential opportunities are presenting themselves now? What is rising up from my unconscious that I am becoming consciously aware of? What might I expect to see, feel, experience if? So it might be that if you continue something or if you stop something. If I continue on this trajectory in this area of my life, what is an outcome I may expect? What obstacles might be standing in my way right now? How can I support myself to think outside of the box and get around any obstacles right now? What does my body, mind, soul, spirit need from me right now? What is my heart most desiring? What is aligned for my highest soul growth at this time? How can I challenge myself to grow in my life, and in which areas? How can I align with my true will or my soul's divine purpose? What am I not seeing about this situation? What does my higher self want me to focus on right now? How can I advance in my journey, whichever circumstance, situation, journey it is? How can I manifest ... and what steps do I need to take on that journey? How can I give myself grace in this situation? What am I ignoring or not willing to see and work on? What has been my greatest achievement so far with ... And finally, some bonus points. Although tarot may be a tool to support with predicting potential outcomes of situations, it is not only a predictive tool, and for some readers it may not be a predictive tool at all. It is a tool for empowerment and transformation and introspection, for supporting ourselves to learn more and to live better lives and to become more well-rounded versions of ourselves. Every card is really nuanced, so I don't believe that there are any cards that are inherently good or bad. I think all cards have a side that could be considered as more malefic and a side that's considered more benefic. And some reversals, for instance, are the more of the benefic side of whatever that is, and some cards have both the upright and reverse meanings as nebulous. So there is so much nuance there. Also, when reading reversals, it's not just cut and dry that if you do read a reversal that you simply reverse the idea of what the upright is. It doesn't have to be that way either. Definitely be cautious around over-reading for yourself, especially around one particular topic. I think it's really helpful to practice daily, and for that, daily draws are really good. Maybe do 3 cards for a daily draw rather than just the one, because it gives you more to bounce off of. But try not to over-read for yourself on one topic. And certainly if there is a client coming to you every month or so, or every few weeks with the same question, you're going to want to really consider your ethics. And that's another element that we've just not gone into today, but something that you really, really need to do. If you're going to be doing this for others and charging for your services, you need to have your code of conducts and code of ethics outlined. You don't want to become dependent upon the tarot, and you don't want to be seeing a card and then reading it the way you want and having that confirmation bias. It's not exactly going to be supporting you. And sometimes I think it is easier for some tarot readers to go to other people, especially if they're in a bind. So just because you read tarot, it does not mean that you can't go to someone else and ask for a tarot reading. In fact, quite a lot of tarot readers do that. There is a beautiful practice practice that I have experienced in circle with some like-minded souls. The listening partnership is based on this idea of sort of reciprocity, whereby everyone understands that the other person has the tools within them to solve a problem or a challenge, or understand and unpick a problem for themselves. You just hold within you that faith that that person has that, and listen to provide support. And it's obviously a safe space as well. And so I think that that's a really nice way to sort of approach a tarot reading. Obviously, you are there to do more than just listen, so it's not a listening partnership, but to approach it with that sort of energy and that faith that the person is able to utilize their tools to figure it out for themselves beyond the tarot reading, and it is in their hands after you have done your work. So tarot helps us to see the bigger picture and solve situations with new solutions. It facilitates internal shifts, ways of perceiving things, by allowing us to have some space to look at the ways in which we're thinking and the ways in which we're behaving. So we understand that the mental plane is causal, and so our thoughts do to some extent create our reality. And so being able to kind of look at the ways in which we are thinking and what we're putting out into the world, it can be a really, really great mirror for ourselves, the mirror into the soul. A really nice way that I like to consider the tarot is as a story. I think it's great for mapping out stories. If you are a writer, I think it is a really great practice to read for a character in a film that you know well, do a reading for a particular character at a particular point in their story, interpret it. I mean, because you know their story as well, that can really, really help you when you're learning. With the tarot, look at the images in front of you that are next to each other as a storyboard. Just start to put together a story for what these cards could mean. Really good exercise for playing with the tarot, especially when you are new. I have a video on my channel about spellwork with the tarot, so intentionally picking tarot cards to manifest and to include into spellwork and rituals to co-create the future with your tarot deck can be really powerful as well. Again, a very, very different practice. I think tarot journaling is so key. To journal the spreads, any wisdom that you glean, any action that you need to take, and then also to review. Some final tips when you are looking at the art: be sure to look at the positions, look at the colours, look at the weather, look at the outfits, look at the elements, look at the suits, imagine before and after, read it as if it was a story, and start to understand the symbolism behind each of the archetypes and each of the tarot cards for the Smith-Waite system. If that is, you're starting at the beginning, I'm a Smith-Waite girl through and through, although I do have the Thoth and I have a few decks that are based on the Thoth and I do enjoy them. I also have a couple of decks that lean to more of a Marseille style deck, and I know some readers prefer those styles of decks, so it's really your journey. So you're going to wish to do your tarot journaling, reading whatever books you like, and building up your own correspondences as well as the ones that you read. You don't always have to go by the book, and sometimes you might be in a reading and you will just get a download or interpretation will come to you, and you'll know that that is the correct interpretation for this card in this particular context, with this particular question for this particular client or for yourself. You'll know that it's the correct interpretation. Trust what comes to you first when you're trusting your intuition. That's so important. You'll be surprised at how many ways, diverse, nuanced ways, a card can show up in a reading. And I think it's so, so valuable to document those so you can keep a record of those for yourself as your practice evolves. Continue to learn about signs and symbolism. Do some research into the archetypes, into Carl Jung, into shadow work, etc. These will really support your tarot practice, as will any magical practice, meditative practices as well, embodying the tarot cards and the energies of the tarot cards in your life. You'll start to notice how tarot plays out, and the moments that you experience in your life, you'll see that, you'll feel that. You may wish to art journal for your tarot cards and tarot correspondences, or art journal your readings and your interpretations, and that really might help you to process some of the things that you uncover in your readings. When I was at university, I studied drama therapy. I did a dissertation about arts therapies utilized for a specific client group and the therapeutic efficacy of that particular approach. Honestly, art therapy is so, so powerful, and I consider that to be a form of magic in itself. You also might want to look into astrology, numerology, Kabbalah, etc. older esoteric teachings and grimoires as well to round out your education, historical origins of the tarot, its context as well, the art, it can be really profound, really supportive. Overall, enjoy your journey. Understand it is a journey. You are never going to get to a point where you know everything. You are on this journey for yourself and to provide support for others if you so wish to share your talent. There is no right or wrong. There are guidelines, of course. There's ways in which to be ethical about reading. But in terms of interpretation and your practice, you can make this what you want it to be, essentially. Be kind to yourself, enjoy the journey, and trust what comes up. Listen to the messages that bubble up within you. You'll be centered, you'll be present, you'll be able to keep your ears open and listen to those small voices. Listen to the cards. Imagine what they might say to you if you was to speak with them. And that's another thing that you can dive into: pathworking, stepping into a card, having a conversation, a dialogue with one of the characters, embodying one of the characters within the card, living in the card for a little bit of journey, visualize, meditation, pathworking through a card to really understand in an embodied way the process of being within this card and what that means. That embodiment practice can be so transformative for whatever it is that you're coming to the tarot with.
So I want to thank Ethony again for sending me these beautiful decks. I cannot wait to start reading with them. I highly encourage you to pick one up if you think that you will enjoy using it. Do so at Ethony's website. I will leave all of Ethony's details below. I'm just so thrilled to have these in my collection, and I was so overjoyed when I received the message from Ethony. I'm just so humbled because I really look up to Ethony's work and I really enjoy her content as well. Her body of work speaks for itself really, and how much she does for the community as well. I'm really pleased to be sharing these decks and I cannot wait to work with them in my practice. So thank you so much for being here. I hope that you enjoyed seeing these beautiful decks, and I hope that some of the information that I chatted about today resonated for you. Of course, if some of it didn't, that's also fine. I am definitely open to hearing other thoughts and ideas in the comments box, obviously just with politeness, and kindness and respect, because we're all on different journeys. We come together because we have shared passions for things, but I completely respect that someone else might have a different journey or a different way of working, and that's absolutely valid and perfectly fine. I will never say that something has to be done a certain way. It's just what works for me and what my practice is like and what I believe in after my practice and experiencing what I have experienced with the tarot and working with the tarot for magic, being a witch in general in my practice. If some of it resonates but other parts don't, feel free to take what resonates, leave the rest. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments box. If you want to let me know which deck is your favourite, if you've got a deck yourself from Ethony, one of these decks or another deck, please tell me about it in the comments box. Do share your experiences with tarot and your journey. Thank you again so much for being here. I hope that you got something from this video, whether you are new to tarot, intermediate, an expert. I think that we continue to learn as readers, especially as we read for ourselves and as we read for others, and I think it's just so nice to be able to hear how other people practice as well and read with the tarot, even if it's different from your own. So please do share your experiences with tarot in the comments box. I'd love to hear which one's your favourite. Do you have any of these? How have you been getting on with them? I hope that that's helped to support. I hope there's been some food for thought here for you. I hope that this has been nourishing. Leave me a little candle emoji if you made it to the end of the video, because then I'll know that you are listening to the hermit part. If you'd like to support me, I have a Patreon where I share some tarot spreads and occasional extra supportive tools. I also have an Instagram page where you can go and follow me, and I often share what I'm up to in sort of more real time there. I have an old TikTok page with some old videos which you might find supportive if you wanted to go and follow me over there, but I'm just so grateful that you are here. So please drop me a like, click the thumbs up button, share with anyone who you think this would also support, and comment below. Let me know what tip has been helpful for you today, if you have heard something new, or let me know what works for you in your practice. This is not an exhaustive list, as much as I would love to be able to provide that.
I am working it within the limitations of being a human, fallible person, as we all are. And so being comprehensive is simply not possible, no matter how hard I try and would wish it to be so. But I am incredibly grateful to be here. I'm so grateful for everyone who watches and likes and subscribes and shares comments. I've been so profoundly comforted by the support I've received since my most recent video. So thank you so much for the love. I see you. I'm just very grateful that you're here. Do subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you again for joining me. Drop me a comment below. I'd love to hear from you about your practice, your favorite reading experiences for someone else or for yourself, and what you've learnt that has been most profound for you during your journey. Thank you again for watching, subscribing, liking and sharing. All of the links are below. Thanks again for watching. Take care of yourselves. I look forward to seeing you again in another video soon. Many blessings. Bye.